Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Karen Viaga, and I'm the Sales Development Representative here at Qualtrics. Thank you for joining us for our How to Improve Employee Engagement today, who will be presented by Cindy Moran. This webinar will be recorded and made available to everyone this week. Feel free to share that with anybody on your team, or if you would like to reference it again, it will be available. We highly encourage that if you have any questions throughout the webinar today, please feel free to put them in the questions area located in the GoToWebinar application. If we have time at the end, we'll review those and present them to Cindy, and she can address those. But if we run out of time, we will definitely do some follow-up after the webinar to make sure that those questions are addressed. So let me tell you a little bit about Cindy. Cindy Moran is the Scientific Operations Director with Arkansas State Crime Laboratory, located in Little Rock, Arkansas. She is also the past president of the Association of Forensic Quality Assurance Managers, or for short, of course, AFQAM. Cindy has lots of experience in forensic chemistry, quality assurance, and Lean Six Sigma principles, and she definitely uses that experience to help streamline solutions for the crime laboratory. So, without further ado, I am going to hand the controls over to Cindy. And Cindy, you should get prompted to take the screen.
Okay.
And I can see your screen.
Okay.
And I can hear you.
All right, fantastic. Well, I just first want to thank Qualtrics for, I guess, allowing me to share my thoughts on this topic. And, you know, it was a topic that I guess I initially started researching because of the supervisors here at the Arkansas State Crime Lab. So the way that our organization is organized is we have about 144 employees. 10 section chiefs over all of our different disciplines, and then I supervise those section chiefs. And oftentimes what I like to do every other month in our meetings is to talk about management items. And one of the items we were talking about as managers, how do we take care of ourselves? You know, turning off your cell phones in the evenings, not looking at the cell phone the first thing you do in the morning, looking at your cell phones, because I think oftentimes that's what we do. We go to bed, look at that cell phone, and first thing in the morning we look at our cell phone. So taking care of ourselves and making sure we're spending time with our families. And one of the supervisors at the end of the presentation asked the question, how can I get my employees to be more like me, more engaged? And so, of course, then I started researching this topic of employee engagement. And at the very end, I'll share with you the resources that I used to come up with these slides and the thoughts that came behind these slides, as well as, you know, just even experiences here at the Arkansas State Crime Lab. So I have given this before a little bit longer, so this is a little bit abbreviated, but one of the things that I did is I reached out previously to attendees that were going to be attending the seminar and asked them, what do you hope to gain out of attending employee engagement presentation? And this is some of the responses, and I think we can all relate to these. You know, hiring practices to find employees who have that motivation, who want to stay engaged. Oftentimes many of us are in the government field, and so how can we, you know, think outside the box on engaging employees that doesn't involve funding necessarily. Strategies for inspiring staff, you know, staying motivated, taking ownership of their work in their work environment, having high morale, and, you know, just encouraging colleagues who are in that non-supervisory capacity to stay engaged. So, and I think hopefully I answer all of these items today plus a little bit. One thing, if you get nothing else out of this presentation, and I think we all know it, but oftentimes we forget about it, is that employees are an organization's greatest asset. You can have the best building in the world, you can have all the equipment, all the supplies, but if you don't have the right employees, then oftentimes, you know, you struggle as an organization. So that's really going to be the focus today, is focusing on our employees. So just briefly, kind of where I'm going to go with this, I did switch it around quite a bit from last time I gave it. Talk about what is employee engagement. You know, what do we mean when we say that? Applications, interviewing, and onboarding. That's really important, and that's what a lot of people are starting to talk about these days. What drives engagement? We're actually going to talk about 10 items that drive engagement and go in depth with 7 of those items. Understanding turnover, at least in the forensic industry, it's very difficult when we lose individuals because the training periods are so long. And lastly, taking action, actually taking action towards engagement and changing the culture of our organization. So just first, what is employee engagement? Well, this is a long definition, but the bottom line is I'll try to underline some key words. Give of their best each day. They're committed to their organization's goals and values, motivated to contribute to organizational success, an enhanced sense of their own well-being. If I'm looking for an employee, those are the things I'm looking for. They're giving their best each day. They're committed. They're motivated. They have a sense of what they're doing in the organization. But there are 3 types of employees. And as I go through these, and we're going to go through in depth the characteristics of each of these individuals, I want you to be thinking about the individuals in your laboratory and kind of start categorizing those employees. First, you have your actively engaged employees. Secondly, you have your ambivalent employees. And lastly, and unfortunately, we do have those actively disengaged employees. So who are those actively engaged employees? Well, those are the people who go above and beyond. They're frequently doing more than what's asked of them. Oftentimes they're coming to you asking, hey, can I do this? They're passionate about the mission. They care about the mission. They know the mission, the vision, and the values of your lab or your organization. They're self-motivated and they're driven to perform at a higher level. They like it when new employees come. They're welcoming, they're supportive, they're the first in line to start training new employees. They contribute to new ideas, often to better the organization. Instead of bringing problems to you, they're oftentimes bringing the solutions or new ideas to prevent problems. They're easy to adapt to changes, and they like change, and that they're optimistic about their future with the organization. They see their job as a career and not just a stepping stone. Your ambivalent employees, they're not apt to go the extra mile. They'll do what you ask for them to do, but they're not inclined to do a whole lot more. Whenever you ask for volunteers to do things, they're probably not going to volunteer. They have lower energy, lackluster performance on assignments, and really they're just simply trying to get by day to day. And they feel oftentimes unappreciated or unimportant, and they're going to work simply for the paycheck. They don't see this necessarily as a career. Oftentimes you'll see their attendance record being haphazard. Maybe they take off a day here and a day there and it really doesn't make sense. And they're really just not very excited about their job. Actively disengaged employees. They have negative attitudes about their employer and their job duties. You probably know who these people are. They're malcontent. They sometimes openly show their distaste while on the job, and I've found with these people oftentimes it's not sometimes, it's a lot of the times. They tend to focus on the problems, not bringing solutions, and we know that they can cause more harm than good. Oftentimes we always say one rotten apple can ruin the whole bunch, and that's really true with these types of employees. They're not personally invested in the success of the organization. They badmouth supervisors, and they love to share their negative personal viewpoints with new employees and ambivalent employees. And so the book that I read, and like I said, I'll reference it at the end, they indicated, these are the people that you want to get off the bus, and you want to do it quickly. But if your organization is a governmental organization like mine, that's easier said than done. And so I still think that there's hope for these types of employees and getting them engaged, but just keep these things in mind. So, since I can't get feedback from you all, but what is your engagement demographic? As I kind of talked through that, I wanted you to kind of visualize, where do you see your organization? Well, nationally, this is where they stand, and this is just all careers, not a specific career, but only 27% of employees are actively engaged. That's not, that's the types of employees that we want 100%, and there's only 27% actively engaged. 60% fall in that category of ambivalent, and 13% are disengaged. My laboratory, I did ask my supervisors, they were involved in a little bit of the study. They're always my guinea pigs, but I asked for them to really look at their employees and come up with a number. How many of your employees are actively engaged, ambivalent, and disengaged? And this is the response that I received. So I was happy to see that we have an increase in actively engaged individuals, 43%. About 46% are in that ambivalent category, but unfortunately, we still have 1 out of 10 people who are disengaged, and we know that they can really be harmful to our organization. So what are some things you can do now? And you'll notice in the top right corner of the slides, every once in a while I have these, I call them idea boxes, because these are things that you might want to jot a note about, something you want to implement in your organization. But one thing that you can do right now is pair your actively engaged employees with those ambivalent employees on projects, assignments, because oftentimes those ambivalent employees can be swayed pretty easily. So maybe if they hang around, those actively engaged people, they'll become more engaged themselves. And secondly, maybe more importantly, is limit the interaction between your disengaged employees with those ambivalent, and especially your new employees. So what I've started telling the supervisors here is, with new employee training, until you can get that disengaged employee more engaged, that's not someone you want to pair your new employee up with. If someone is satisfied, are they engaged? And this is something that I asked my supervisors, and I think we all got it right, and you guys probably know the answer as well. So the answer, of course, is no. Satisfaction is an indicator of mood or opinion, and I had to throw the mood ring up because that was fun back when I was a kid. But it's really all satisfaction is how is somebody feeling, where engagement ties to really employees' behavior, their performance. They care about the organization and the mission and the vision. So satisfied employees can be happy, satisfied, and not engaged, because they're underperformers who are just real happy to be underperforming. They don't care. Who is responsible for employee engagement? And this is something, like I said, I ask, and oftentimes I hear, well, it's up to the employee to be engaged. No, it's up to the manager to be engaged. But really, engagement is a two-way street. Engagement's up to both the manager and the employee to get the employee to be more engaged. Oftentimes, employees do think that it's up to the manager to take that ownership and engage them. And when they think that way, they think, the employer, they're holding all the cards, and there's nothing I could do about my situation, and either they're going to stay with your organization and be unhappy, or they're going to leave. Oftentimes, there's not much we can do to motivate an employee who has no interest in advancing. The employee must want to be more engaged. And, it is personal choice. We all wake up in the morning, we make the choice to approach the day with either, optimism and engagement, or to be negative and disengaged. And so, or some will be just in the middle. So it is oftentimes a personal choice, but you can see that it takes both the manager and the employee for engagement to happen. So, ownership is important, and important for the employee to take that ownership. We want our employees to think and act like owners. That's important in their daily decisions and how hard they work. If you're an owner of a company, and you're vested in that company, you're going to work hard for that company. And so this is my nice little diagram, but do you go out of your way to change the oil in a rental car? No, of course you don't. You don't care. As long as it works while it's in your possession, that's all you really care about. So if employees feel like they have ownership, hopefully they're going to exhibit that passion, that pride, that loyalty that come with the characteristics of ownership and engagement. And so just going back, the numbers don't lie. 73% of workers are not currently actively engaged. If you remember from that slide, only 27% are actively engaged. So, what do? Well, it's up to us to get it started and to teach employees about engagement. It all starts with recruitment and onboarding and getting those right people in your organization. Believe it or not, 1 in 25 employees quits on the first day. I was trying to think back at our organization if that had ever really happened, and the only time I could think of it was maybe someone working in our morgue, because we do have a medical examiner's office, which is understandable. But retention really, it starts with hiring that right person for the job, someone who has those natural traits of being actively engaged. So, I asked the question, think about what is your hiring process, and we're going to go through some tips, and we've started using some of these items I'm going to talk about, and so far I think it's been really great tools, and we've been successful with onboarding the right people. So step 1 is finding and determining the best person for the job. First, you have to know what you're looking for. And so, when we did this, I said, let's make a list of characteristics that we're looking for in an employee. And we'll talk about this in a few slides in just a minute. You want those people who can make, you oftentimes hear, make lemonade out of lemons, but that's what you want. You want optimists. You want those engaged tendencies. Because, it's essential to build a staff comprised of those talented, positive people with whom others want to work with. And, it doesn't stop, when you hire somebody, determining if you have found the right person for the job. It's a constant assessment. I ask the question also when I have a live audience is, would you rather hire someone with character or skill? Well, character, I think, is the right answer here. Oftentimes we do get hung up. You look at a job application, you're like, oh man, this person has all of this experience at this organization. They know how to work on this type of equipment. That'll be great to bring those type of people in. But really, character is what you really want to focus on. That's the core being of who we are. That defines our ethics, our values, dedication, our motivation, and our outlook. They say it's nearly impossible to alter one's character. That character comes up as how you were raised and how you were brought up. Where skill is really more learned. But I tell my supervisors, skills can be taught, character cannot. So really focus on the character of a person when you're going through the application and the interview process. So job applications. You need to have a comprehensive job application. I don't know what your process is, but here in the state of Arkansas, we have a website. And basically, once you have created an application and applied for a job here in the state of Arkansas for any government job, you can just simply, with a click of a button, apply for any other job out there. Just really doesn't take much thought. And so oftentimes, as you guys probably experience as well, you get hundreds of applications of people who do not even have the minimum qualifications, and you have to sort through those applications, or your HR department has to sort through those applications. So, just thinking differently about it, what if you could include some open-ended questions so that you can assess the individual's personality, their writing skills, communication skills, can they communicate and give that answer? So what we've started doing, we've started adding these questions, and typically there's some of our interview questions that we would ask on these job applications, and we tell the people, hey, this may take 20 to 30 minutes to complete the application, but if someone fills it out, then they really want the job, and they maybe will exhibit those engagement characteristics that you're looking for. It really has decreased the number of applications that we get into the laboratory, and we find that we're just getting now more of those qualified individuals applying for the positions. So once you've looked through all the applications and you've chosen candidates to interview, these are some traits to look for in a candidate. Are they on time? Are they dressed appropriately? If they show up in blue jeans, you know, that may be a warning sign. Do they have a positive disposition? Do they seem to have emotional intelligence? And you'll get some of that also from them answering those questions. Do they have accountability, and will they take ownership of mistakes in the past? Do they have passion for the work? Do they have drive to succeed? Adaptability to accept feedback, ability to accept feedback, and adaptability. And the way you can determine this is by asking some situational questions, and we do that a lot. But then also on the other side, so those are some characteristics to look for, you also need to have a list of deal breakers that automatically disqualifies a candidate. You know, if I have a candidate that won't look me in the eye, that makes me a little bit nervous. If they can't clearly and concisely answer a question, that's another one. Or if they will not talk about or admit their mistakes and they seem to be blaming others, that could be a warning sign as well. So, you know, I encourage you, before you even go into an interview, you know, write down those traits that you're looking for, write down those deal breakers, and so that when you go in, you're really prepared when you're having the interview. Referrals. I can be honest and say that oftentimes I ignore when people come up to me and say, hey, such and such applied for the job, you know, they're really a great person, and oftentimes I just kind of blow it off. But, you know, really we should take those referrals more seriously. And when I thought about this, I thought, you know, I wouldn't refer an employee unless I really, really thought they would do a good job, because I don't want it to come back negatively on me. And so that's why, you know, I encourage you to listen to referrals from, you know, your employees, because like I said, it reflects back on them. But also, it is a preliminary assessment of the individual if you hear that they're a hard worker and those sorts of things. So this is a little game I play when I do have a live audience, but oftentimes I think this is how we think. You know, if a candidate went to a certain university or worked for a certain company, they must be the perfect fit. As we just talked about, you know, you really want to look at character more than you want to look at skill. Setting extremely narrow criteria for qualifications will help weed out the candidates who would not be good for the job. Well, oftentimes, you know, that's a myth, because oftentimes you can miss out on some really great people. So just be aware of that. I mean, you have to have your minimum qualifications, of course, but you don't want to go too far out there, because you might lose some good people. Some good people maybe straight out of college that would be a good fit in your organization. The purpose of an interview is for the employer to assess the job candidate. Well, that's not quite true either. All these are myths if you haven't figured out the trend. But no, it's really not. It's for the job candidate also to assess the employee. You know, you got to sell your organization as well. An interviewee only needs to meet with one person from the organization. Well, of course, that's also a myth. You want them to be able to meet and get a feel for the culture of your organization. So step 2, it is important also to educate the candidate on the position before they are hired. And so make sure your job descriptions are comprehensive and accurate. Ours are not great here in the state of Arkansas because it lumps forensic scientists, and so it's not very detailed, but we do have an area in which we can add additional preferred qualifications, and that's where we add exactly what the job is. But of course, we also communicate it during the job interview. You know, talk about the anticipated work schedule. If this is something they're going to be working after hours, you need to let them know that. Give them a list of job duties. Of course, I like this little cartoon. It says, I've always wondered why you decided to be a dog, and Snoopy says, I was fooled by the job description. So make sure that your job description is clear and accurate. Share the performance evaluation. Share your expectations if you don't want to necessarily share the performance evaluation before they're hired. You know, let them know, you know, if you have quotas or productivity goals, you need to let them know that, so they know that coming in, that you're going to expect high productivity and great quality and those sorts of things. Another thing that we've started doing in our organization is we have upper management meet with the top candidates before they're hired. This has been good for a number of reasons. Well, number one, when we see the new employees in the hall, we know who they are. But more importantly, it just gives us a time to talk to that candidate, share the missions and goals of the organization from our perspective. We also give them the good, bad, and the ugly. We're very transparent about, it's low pay, this is an old building, those sorts of things. But we also talk about the good, in that we're a great organization to work for, we're family oriented, those sorts of things. And it just gives the candidate a chance to ask questions. So it's really not an interview situation, it's more of a relaxed situation where we have good conversation back and forth. And that's a good way to sell your organization as well. So now you've hired the individual. What should you do before they start? Well, one thing you can do is start off on the right foot by sending a card or an email to the individual congratulating them, and also have them fill out maybe a getting to know you questionnaire so you can have an idea of the things they like, food items, colors, NFL teams, just so that when they come on, maybe you can do those sorts of things that make them feel more comfortable. Onboarding. There's been a lot of talk about this, I know, at least in the forensic community. Only 59% of employees believe that their orientation was adequate. That's not very good. The first impressions really do count when someone is here. And so you want to make sure that that orientation is adequate, not overbearing with a lot of reading. And I could get further into that, but I won't today. But here are just some first day practices. Greeting new hires, and specifically, this should be done by the supervisor or the manager at the door. It sends a strong message that the new employee will be supported and guided by that manager. Introduce new hires to others. Give them a tour of your entire facility. Let them meet people. Coworkers are an important part of engagement. Clean and organize the new hires' their workspace. I mean, they shouldn't feel like they're taking over someone else's role, but actually starting a new one. And if you look at I'm into comments, you'll see, it says this will be your cubicle. In 6 weeks, our IT people will connect you to the network so you can do your job. I'll stop by every few minutes to see what you're doing. Obviously, that's not a great way to onboard your employee. You want to make them feel special. You want to make sure that their area is nice and clean, that they have everything that they need to be successful at their job. Present a welcome basket. You can do that through, if you ask that questionnaire, what do people like, what's their favorite candy, those sorts of things. You can just have something that's special for them, make them feel special on that first day. Make sure and assign a simple project first. Just don't overburden them. I know oftentimes in our organization we just want to get them up and trained quickly, and there's a reason, because we have backlogs in crime labs. But just start it off slow. Maybe organize a team lunch. I mean, I can remember when I started first here at the crime lab, I was like, do I take my lunch? Do I not take my lunch? So, have individuals that are ready to maybe go out to lunch with this new employee on the first day. And then just lastly, assign a job buddy, someone that obviously you want somebody that's actively engaged and has that same job function. The first day should be kind of celebratory, it should be relaxed, and avoid the information dump. Oftentimes we're just like, fill out all these forms and it's just awful. So just keep that in mind. Keep it light and don't overwhelm them. Training. At least in the forensic laboratory, we know that we have to provide adequate training before an employee can come off and start performing independent casework. But in any organization, obviously you want to train people on how to do their job duties before they're expected to complete their task. I think that's pretty common sense. But really, what is the key to a good, solid training program? And for most anything in any organization is communication. So, it needs to be clear what the expectations are going to be, where you expect them to be in the training program at a certain date and time, so that they can be mentally prepared. The program should have flexibility to allow for adjustments based on the individual's needs. Some people learn really quickly, some people are a little slower. So, you know, those, say you hire 2 or 3 at the same time, it's okay if one comes off a little bit sooner than the others, because the last thing you want to do is they could become disengaged by being held back. Seek feedback after the first week or two. You know, that's your first impressions, and you want to hear, hey, how's it going? You know, are you staying engaged? Are you learning? What do we need to change? Do you need more hands-on? That sort of thing. And then lastly, and this is something we have started doing, is seeking feedback once the training is completed. You can create a survey. We have a survey, and then oftentimes I have the employees come and meet with me, and we go through their training binders. Just say, hey, what was great about the training program? What could be improved? Where did you need to spend more time? Where did you spend too much time? So that's something that can be used proactively to then change your existing training program and improve it. Step 4, this is the last step of onboarding, ensuring the organization delivers on what it promised during the hiring process. This is so important. It's probably the most important step of the recruiting process. More than 59% of all employees who leave an organization do so within 6 months to a year. And so, yeah, it's a pretty staggering figure. Of those who do stay, another 50% leave before 2 years of employment. If you do the math, 80% of employees hired never make it past 2 years. And we know, at least, like I said, in the forensic organization, turnover can be detrimental to our backlog and turnaround time. So, you know, we want to keep people here and engage them and want them to feel like this is really a career. So new employees, oftentimes they come in with that excitement, they come in with that optimism, and oftentimes it's lost. So how do we keep that engagement? And that's where we're going to talk about next, is what drives engagement. 84% of engagement is attributed to 10 factors. We're going to go through all 10, and we're going to really dive into, I think, the first 7 of these key drivers. But these are in order of importance. So the first one, which you might find surprising, is recognition. All people want is to be recognized. And we're going to go into some ideas on how we can improve in that area. Career development is number 2. Direct supervisor leadership abilities. Strategy and mission. And job content. So you would oftentimes think that that one might be higher up on the list, but it's not. Senior management's relationship with employees. That's important. Open and effective communication. Coworker satisfaction or cooperation. Availability of resources to perform the job effectively. And lastly, organizational culture and core shared values. Now, what you didn't see on these slides is pay. And oftentimes we focus a lot on pay. Pay is important. It's important to reward your employees, but it did not make this list of key drivers for engagement. So let's go into key driver number 1, excuse me, recognition. People want to feel appreciated for a job well done. And I think it even goes back to when we were kids. You know, we would receive positive recognition from our teachers with, you know, the smiley face stickers on our homework pages. Nice work, great job. Well, adults want that same recognition. Get rid of the theory of no news is good news. And one of my supervisors who the section just works seamlessly, oftentimes I won't walk around and visit with them. He said, what's going on? Why aren't you coming around? You know, we'd really like to see you come around and visit us. I said, well, oftentimes I forget about you guys because everything is running great. Well, it's, you know, I still need to make sure I do that and go over and recognize and show them how much I do appreciate them. Only 59% of employees say their supervisor lets them know when they have done a good job. And I say here, surely more supervisors appreciate their employees, and I think that we all do, but maybe we're not showing it effectively. when employees feel appreciated, they'll be engaged, which means that they'll work harder and produce a higher quality of work, which reflects, right back on management. So it's important that we do this just for the well-being of the employee, but it also for the organization. So this is one of the books that I have read, and I know people make fun of me around here for all the books that I read, but this is really a great book. It's called The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. It's written by Gary Chapman and Paul White. If you've read the 5 Love Languages, this is the same author of that book. But it talks about there are 5 different languages of appreciation. There's words of affirmation, and these are the people who all they want is for you to say, hey, great job, or, hey, I know that you spent a lot of time on this project, you worked late, I really appreciate it. I'm probably one of those people. That's what I need. I need words of affirmation to keep me going. Some people would like for you to recognize them in a big crowd, so you have to be really careful, but some would not, and that's what I meant, is you have to be really careful. You don't want to recognize someone. You need to be able to recognize what their language of appreciation is, but be careful, because some people would be mortified if you did it in front of a group of 100. And so this book kind of coaches you through determining what each language is. Quality time. I have some people that just love to come and sit in my office, and I've had to learn to be patient and let them do that. Acts of service. Some employees would just love for you to come and maybe do some work alongside of them, and that certainly is a good thing too, and that shows that you're in the trenches with them. Some people want gifts, tangible gifts, and that's a difficult one, but one thing I do is I give out gift cards, and they're not much. They're $10 gift cards to Starbucks and things like that, but that's some people like that. And then we won't even get into the last one, physical touch, because that's a touchy subject in today's day and age, but the book does talk about that being a language as well. Maybe it's just a pat on the shoulder. Key driver number 2, career development. In forensics, career advancement is limited. It just is, and we're going to talk a little bit about the career ladder, but oftentimes when promotions seem like a waiting game, or someone gets promoted and they still have another 15 years before they're going to retire, everyone else is going, what's in it for me now? I have no chance of moving up. And so you have that risk for turnover when that occurs. More and more organizations are eliminating what's called the middle manager positions, and actually there's been a 25% decrease from 1986 to 2006. And so that's really what we're moving towards. Instead of having the career ladder, which we've talked about for a long time in years past, it's more now coming to a career lattice in many organizations. So the ladder provides more opportunities for advancement. More management positions are available. But these organizations are shifting to the lattice structure. Why? Decision making is faster. Maybe you don't have to pay for those middle managers. Of course, the cons of that is limited opportunities for career advancement, and several times you have employees that want to be more and want to be in a leadership position, and there's just limits to that. So what can you do if you're in that lattice structure, or you have those limited opportunities for advancement? Well, I say delegate, delegate, delegate. It's unpaid, but it makes the individual feel special that they're getting to do duties other than what they were really hired for. It gives them more of a purpose. And so these are just some examples, at least in the forensic field. Give somebody a title of training officer or quality manager in a section, or maybe they're your ordering manager, maybe they're case manager, LIMS administrator, document control software administrator like Qualtrics. I probably need to hand over some of those duties. Timesheet manager, some of the things that I hate doing, I should delegate those things to somebody who would love to do that, because it makes them feel important. Website coordinator. The other thing that we can do to provide those leadership opportunities is provide some education that's paid for by the organization. And I know in the forensic field we are required to have annual training. And so we can do that, but maybe we can pay for certifications. We do that continuing education. But one thing that we're looking at now in our organization is tuition compensation. You know, if someone's going to take a statistics class and they're a forensic DNA analyst and they're doing it because it's going to make them better at their job, then, you know, can we compensate them? And so that's some of the things we're looking at here in our organization. So this is going to help the employee grow as well as the organization. So it really is a win-win for the employee and the organization. Key driver number 3 is direct supervisor leadership abilities. And this really is probably the most impactful because it drives number 1 and number 2. It depends on the leadership abilities of that person. Can they recognize people? Can they recognize that this person needs career development in a certain area? So I asked the question, do you have the right people driving the bus? Supervisors have to know their employees well, you know, well enough to get them in the right roles in their organization. Oftentimes I ask this question in an interview, you know, what's the difference between a manager and a leader? Well, a manager handles those day-to-day activities. They coordinate, problem solve, maintain stability. At least in our organization, they're looking at backlog and turnaround time and assigning cases and those sorts of things. Managing is typically easier to measure than leading. And supervisors oftentimes can get caught focusing on just on managing. So, you know, you have to guard against that. Now, a leader provides that vision and that inspiration, shapes new ideas, building those personal and meaningful relationships with their employees. They're innovative, they promote change. Oftentimes our supervisors are so busy, they have a multitude of responsibilities, it can cause them to lose sight of the developing into those leadership characteristics. They're just focusing on managing and getting by. But we have to step back and say, hey, we really need to be leaders. They need us to lead. They need us to manage. Anybody can manage, but they really need someone to lead them in order to be successful in engaging employees. So they have to make, your supervisors have to make being a great leader a top priority. And one way to do this is to put others before yourself, and you'll be on the right path towards being a great leader. Key driver number 4, strategy and mission. You know, our goals shape our actions. You know, I often ask, you know, why did I go get a 4-year degree in chemistry? Well, because I was hoping that it would lead to a great job, one that I enjoyed coming to every day, that I could get a paycheck to support my family. So you have to have goals because it does shape our actions. Because if we can't find meaning in what we're doing, we're going to likely stop doing it. Employees need to know why their assignments are of value to the organization and how does it really impact the organization itself, the goals of the organization. They need to understand that big picture and make sure it's effectively communicated to each individual. When these are clearly defined, employees can align themselves with the organization. So it's just some ideas that you can do to help with this key driver. Maybe you develop a strategy map, something they can keep in their wallet or in their purse. But it's up to management to first develop those big goals for the organization. They have to do that. But then the individual employee needs to have goals for themselves. And then if you don't have core values in your organization, I do encourage you to do that. We've done that over the last year and been talking about those core values, and those really shape your organization. So that's one thing we're getting ready to do here at the end of the year, is talk about goals for 2017 for the organization. And from there, I'm going to encourage my supervisors to develop goals for their sections and then encourage their employees to have goals for themselves. So it kind of trickles all the way down. Key driver number 5, job content. Thank goodness this is not key driver number 1, right? Because sometimes somebody has the not so great job, and I throw the trash truck, garbage truck up there for garbage truck employees. Thank goodness we still have those types of people that do those jobs. But if 100% of a person's engagement level is based on what he or she actually did, we would have a lot of disengaged people. They feel like that they don't have a say. They just feel like they have to get the task done and that there are no options. And, you know, they don't want to speak up, and they assume that, okay, this is my job. I guess if I don't want to do it, I need to go somewhere else. Well, that's not true. I mean, we as managers, we must be able to adjust job content to make it more enjoyable. So, you know, one thing you could do is actually sit down with the employee and ask what they like most about their position and what would they like to do more of. There may be something that somebody has a talent that you weren't even aware of that could be really helpful to your organization. You may be able to transition an employee to a different role within an organization. We recently had a DNA analyst who loved working in forensics, but quite frankly was just burnt out in that section, and asked if she could, we had an opening in our firearms section, and asked if she could be transferred. And you know, this is a great employee, one that we wanted to keep, one that was engaged. And so you know, it was hard because this person was already trained, but we knew this was a great employee and we wanted to keep them, so we allowed for that to happen. So, you know, those are some things that you can do, or let them cross-train in different areas that they're interested in. Key driver number 6, senior management's relationship with employees. And this really hits home, at least for me. You know, it's important for, we call it top management, to devote that time with employees, and we call it face time here, and be visible. So to walk around the lab, it always sounds easier said than done for us to make an effort to walk around the laboratory, but it is important, and we're trying to do more of that. And employees seem to like it. We always thought they probably don't want to see us. They probably think when they see us there's something we're going to complain about. And so by doing that more often, then employees, I guess, get to know us, we get to know them, and it's really good. But there is a direct correlation. You know, our visibility equals our concern for employees. And oftentimes, even by walking around, we may see something. You know, maybe we see a piece of equipment that has a sign on it that says out of service. Well, we can ask, you know, is there something that we need to replace, you know, or maybe we see some problems in the lab that need to be fixed. And so, you know, it's not even just talking about work, it's talking about the individual, asking about their family, and those sorts of things. Key driver number 7, open and effective communication. I always say in our organization, most of the problems that we have is because we're not communicating openly and effectively. And so that is one of our core values here at our organization. But only 68% of employees believe that their organization's policies are clearly communicated. And this is just a little chart, and I don't know exactly where these stats came from. It came from the book. I currently receive most of the organization's information from 35% said meetings or discussions with their supervisor. 26 said their coworkers. Well, we know that's not a great idea, because are they really getting the true message? If it's going through, it's kind of like the telephone game. Are they really getting the true intent of the message? But if you ask employees how they would like to receive their information, 52% say from meetings or discussions with the supervisor. You see only 6% say coworkers, or from email or the intranet. So make sure you're communicating effectively and not allowing it to just trickle down. One way you can improve it is by having, we call them lab-wide meetings, so it might be just an agency-wide meeting. They are hard to coordinate, but oftentimes they get to hear it directly from us, you know, maybe things that are going on, and we know that the message is getting communicated effectively. We've implemented Lean Six Sigma in our organization, so every section has what's called quick huddles or sprints to share information either every day or every other day, and these are meant to be really quick, but it's a good way to communicate, you know, who's going to be out of the lab, is an instrument broken, those sorts of things. I've talked about having the agency meetings, and we know in forensics for sure, and probably any organization, it's vital for departments to be able to work together and communicate well. So you might, you know, just get some feedback from your staff on how you guys can improve your communication efforts. Understanding turnover. So I didn't go over the last 8, 9, and 10 because I wanted to touch on a few other things before we run out of time. But like I said, turnover is tough and we all experience it. So if we can get those engaged people, have them happy, then maybe we can decrease this trend of turnover. And this is just some stats. The 1 to 5 year range is sort of like the middle child. Thank goodness I wasn't that, but you're not new enough to get all the attention, but you're not tenured enough to enjoy all the privileges and job opportunities. So we need to keep those people in that 1 to 5 year range engaged. Talk to them about career advancement opportunities, acknowledge their efforts, give that recognition, show that appreciation. One thing that we do here is we have an exit interview, and oftentimes, it's a good time for that employee to say, these are things that really bothered me about the organization, or hey, these were really great things that I really enjoyed about this organization. Once again, seeking that feedback is pretty vital to being able to improve your organization and its culture. Another thing you could do is an employee engagement survey. And if you do something like that, I would encourage not just open-ended answers because oftentimes it can discourage, managers, but, have employees choose from a list of reasons why they're resigning or thinking about resigning and have them rank them. Is it benefits? Is it career advancement? Is it their supervisor, their pay? It's that sort of thing. 72% of employees that leave say they had a very positive or somewhat positive experience with the organization. 40% of exiting employees say they thought about resigning for less than 2 months. That's why it's so vital that we take action in engaging our employees now. We want to keep them engaged. Don't let them get disengaged if they're already engaged. Pay, and I'm not going to talk a whole lot about pay, but we know that oftentimes that is the reason why people leave, even though that wasn't on the list of key drivers. And, quite frankly, some will never be satisfied with what they get paid. It doesn't matter how many pay raises they get, they're not going to be satisfied. And oftentimes those are your actively disengaged people. But really, I think where the dissatisfaction really comes from is lack of communication of, why someone maybe is getting an increase. And I know you have to be careful and you can't discuss a lot of that. But I also think even communicating efforts towards trying to improve pay for employees goes a long way, even if it doesn't happen. It shows that you're going through the effort and you're really trying to make things better for those employees. I know I'm running a little low on time, so I'm going to quickly go through the last couple of slides. Create a fun workplace environment. These are things that we do in our laboratory, and I think our employees have fun, and oftentimes they probably roll their eyes at my ideas, but we have TGIF days, so on Fridays every once in a while I'll do something crazy. I'll pop some popcorn, or around Easter I'll have Easter eggs with candy, and Halloween some candy. So just thinking outside the box on those things. We have a charity committee, so every year we pick a charity that we're going to donate money or items to, and so each month we have fun things to raise money for the charity. So we actually had a Mario Kart tournament to raise money for this charity. We have a bake sale, a book sale, pie in the face sale, as far as raising money for supervisors to get a pie in the face. So just some fun things. We also have started inviting food trucks and ice cream trucks to come to our organization. That's a lot of fun. Potlucks. Who doesn't love a good potluck? So we do lots of potlucks. One thing I've started is challenges with rewards. And so I challenge my sections, especially in the summer months, because we like to be outside, but challenge them, to maybe meet a goal. Maybe it's, decrease the number of mistakes in casework, or get your backlog down to a certain number, and then when they do, then I reward them. I take them to go get ice cream or whatever the reward might be. And something else that was a lot of fun is lunch and a movie. So, buying pizza and letting people watch a movie over lunch on the big screen, that's a big hit as well. So lastly, taking action towards engagement. Well, the first thing, you first have to help employees understand what their own engagement level is, and it has to be shared engagement. So One thing you could do is, and I just did this with my supervisors, have them make a list of what they like best about their job and the organization. What would they like to see changed? Like I said, all of us read performance evaluations. This is a great time to do that and to talk about career advancement. Seek employee feedback through a survey, group meetings, lunch meetings, those sorts of things. Develop a recognition program. Now, you have to be a little bit careful with this. A couple of years ago, we had Employee of the Month. And at some point in time, it was like, okay, we don't have an employee. Who should we recognize? And so you have to be really careful with that. You don't want that program to get watered down. So just be aware of that. Don't overdo it. Give appropriate rewards and those sorts of things. Develop a career development path. Encourage leadership. Allow employees to manage different projects. Allow for them to get certified, educational advancement, all these things that we've been talking about. Follow through and assess the progress. You know, this is where oftentimes we managers drop the ball. We talk about this with employees, and then we don't follow through, which I like Michael Jordan, so he's got a great follow through, so that's why I have that picture up there. But you know, you have to follow through with it, or else it's probably worse that you even went through the process if you didn't follow through with it. So schedule those regular check-in meetings with employees to discuss the progress. And when you determine some actions that you could take to improve the employees' engagement, set due dates and who's responsible and for what actions to make sure that it really does happen. And lastly, lead by example. We must set the example for acknowledging and supporting engagement. You know, remember that engagement is a two-way street. Connect with the employees to understand and act on their needs. You know, it really does show your commitment, and in turn, they're going to commit to being engaged. So this is really my last slide. A little analogy to climbing Mount Everest, which I have not done and don't plan to do. But this is kind of the same. You know, you have to have training and preparation. Those are critical for reaching the summit or the peak. You know, without it, there are multiple opportunities for disengagement, even in the workplace, just talking about being successful in the workplace, and despair and failure in achieving one's objective. So it starts at the beginning with good training and preparation. Strategy and mission. People have to know what the goal is and how does that goal relate to what they're really doing. Same with climbing Mount Everest. You need to know what the goal is. What's the mission? Where are we going to turn around? Those sort. You got to have a good plan. Then you have to have the right tools and the right resources. You know, if you don't give people the instrumentation and supplies that they need, then how can they be successful? So you need to make sure you have the right tools. Just like climbing Mount Everest, I hear you can get what's called snowblind if you don't have the right glasses. So you have to have the right tools. Teamwork. We know that's so important in an organization, so we really need to focus on ways where we can improve teamwork. Like climbing Mount Everest, I understand that oftentimes the team in the steep areas will make sure that they're connected together through rope, so if one starts to slip, the others will feel it and start to move in the opposite direction. So teamwork is important. But we need to encourage feedback as well. How can we know what employees need if we don't ask them? And I say that a lot to my supervisors. If you don't tell me, I don't know. So we have to encourage that feedback, just like climbing Everest. You know, there's feedback. In the book, it talked about the leaders who wouldn't listen to the people that were along with them, the ones who failed and didn't make it to the top and maybe even died at the top. Not employees, the individuals who were telling their leaders, we need to turn around, we need to turn around. They wouldn't listen, and so they continued to go, but the others went back down. So you have to really make sure that you listen to your employees. Creating a culture where engaged employees stay and thrive is the indisputable difference maker in overall success. I get tired of hiring, and I know that the sections do as well. That really takes away from their time from being able to do what they love and process cases. And so, you know, if we can get the right people onboarded, we can keep them engaged, hopefully the turnover rate will decrease and create just that really great culture where everyone wants to stay and have a good career. These are the two references that I pointed to throughout. Building a Magnetic Culture is where I obtained a lot of this information by Kevin Sheridan, and then the 5 appreciation languages in the workplace. And just lastly, I'd like to acknowledge the Arkansas State Crime Lab employees. They have lived through my experiments and crazy ideas. So, you know, I encourage you, don't be afraid to try things. It's okay if a few people roll their eyes. A lot of people really like it, but they really motivate me to make the workplace a better place. And with that, that is the end of my presentation.
Great. Thank you, Cindy, so very much. I think the hard part about giving webinars is you can never hear anybody laughing on the other side. And I have to tell you, you definitely had me laughing a couple times throughout your presentation with some of your little jokes. So I wanted to let you know that I was laughing out loud.
Great.
So, thank you, Cindy, so very much for this great presentation. I know there was people on our side even taking notes on this topic. Cindy and the Arkansas State Crime Laboratory have been with Qualtrics and been customers of ours for quite a long time, and so we are truly grateful to Cindy for being willing to present this information to everybody that's on here today. So again, thank you so very much. Everyone else, we are at 12 o'clock. If you have any questions and you want to put them in the questions area, please feel free to do so. We can follow up with you after the webinar. If you need to get a hold of Cindy, you can find her address here, or her email address. Also, if you are interested in talking to the Qualtrics team, you can call any one of us and we're willing to help you as well. And last but not least, before I close up the session, since Qualtrics is a quality management system to help our customers manage their compliance, we're actually offering a compliance survival kit right now. So what we're doing is saying thank you to all the quality managers and lab directors or anyone really associated with the burdens of compliance by offering this kit. It's free. If you sign up, we'll send you a kit with goodies like sweets, coffees, and stress relief items over the next couple of months to help you get over that compliance hump and give you some extra energy to kind of crush your work week. All you have to do is go to the website that is located on the bottom of this slide. I'll actually put that into the chat area here too. And then you can use the redemption code Survival Kit, all one word, all lowercase. And we'll be happy to send you one. It's 100% free and just a thank you for what you do. Again, let me go ahead and put this information in there, but thank you so very much, everyone, for joining us today. And Cindy, again to you. And I'm going to put this information in. In case anybody wants to grab it. And if not, I hope to talk to you soon. Have a great day, everybody. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thanks. Bye-bye.